In our last two lectures, we have examined the imperial lives of Trajan and Hadrian, those emperors under whom the Roman Empire in the 2nd century AD reached its apex. The Roman Empire of the 2nd century AD was an age in many ways like our own. Politically and economically, it was an age of one superpower, the Empire of Rome. The world was united economically in a way it would not be again until the 20th century. It was an age in which the ordinary inhabitant reached a stage of prosperity, not equaled again until the 20th century. It was a time of political control by one great power, but a great deal of local diversity was admitted and tolerated. In the same way of our world today, the European Union sees one political power but allows the cultures of Germany and France to continue in their own way. So too under the Roman Empire. And in day-to-day activities, it reminds us of our own time. It was an age of fast foods. Go to Ostia, the port of Rome. Go to Timgad in North Africa, or to the ancient city of Athens. And you would find place after place selling not pizzas and hamburgers and tacos, but indeed a kind of pizza. No tomato sauce, but cheese and sausage and onions. Not hot dogs as we call them, but a little sausage wrapped up in a bun. And people spending many of their hours in these fast food places, taking away food and doing a good deal of their eating in these kinds of establishments. It was a time of professional athletics in which the gladiator, the chariot racer, became figures of universal admiration. Rising up out of the solitudes of the deserts of North Africa is the great amphitheater at Elgin. The Colosseum in Rome was built by the Emperor Vespasian as a way of winning popular favor, built in the very middle of what had been the golden house of Nero, giving this back to the people. And sports, gladiators and chariot racers were the constant topic of conversation. It was what brought the wealthiest together with the most ordinary kind of Roman citizen, this common interest in gladiators. It was an age of stress, just like our own, living in these crowded cities, and the Romans of the Republic got plenty of exercise, farming and fighting, but in these days of peace and prosperity, people grew flabby. And the spas of their day were like the exercise clubs of our day, the great baths that every city had, sometimes 3, 4, and 5, and 6, frequently built by the emperor, or often donated by public-spirited individuals of the town. So, if we went back to a city like Ostia, we could, learning a little bit of Latin, find ourselves much at home. Like our own day, it was also a time of creativity. Ours is an age of science and technology, and each day seems to bring some new invention. In the 2nd century AD, the foundations for the next 1,500 years of European civilization were being laid. In art, the column of Trajan, as we have seen, creates a visual narrative of the achievements of Trajan, of how he has brought salvation to the Roman world by the conquest of the savage forces of the Dacians. We look forward to the Gothic cathedral, in which its sculptures are a narrative of the lives of Christ and of the great figures of the Old Testament and the progress of salvation over the dark forces of hell and evil. The Roman law saw the beginning of its consolidation and the creation of a body of law that would determine the legal systems right down to today of the major European nations, except for Britain, and through Britain of the United States. But Roman law in France and Germany, Italy and Spain, and Latin America, it is still the foundation. In medicine, Galen, and in mathematics and geography, Ptolemy created the basis of sciences that would dominate European thought on down until the 16th century. It was using the maps of Ptolemy, created in the 2nd century AD, that led Columbus to believe that if he sailed far enough west, he would come to China. And in architecture, the Pantheon creates an envelope of space, an entire architecture of space, in which the purpose is not to appreciate the building from the outside, the way we do with the Parthenon in Athens, the Parthenon of the 5th century BC. The Pantheon is to create a mystical experience, a spiritual experience in which the soul of the observer sails up to become one with the supreme God of the universe. For the creativity of the 2nd century A.D. would lay the spiritual foundations for Europe for almost 2,000 years to come. It was the age in which Christianity spread and would finally become the religion of the Roman Empire, transforming itself from a persecuted sect into the official religion of the empire and become a great world religion. We go back to the reign of Trajan and to the letters of Pliny to Trajan that we discussed earlier. And we find Pliny, during his time as the troubleshooter in the provinces of Bithynia and Pontus, in the Black Sea, what is today Turkey, we find him in a courtroom. And we find him writing of his experiences to Trajan. For I have taken it as a primary task, says Pliny, to find out about these Christians. For their number is such, and their influence so pernicious, that the worship of the true gods has almost been blotted out from the provinces. I bring them before me. I do not make use of anonymous complaints. I confront them with their witnesses, and then I ask the suspect, the accused, will you offer up sacrifice to the emperor? If he says no, I then charge him with being a Christian and give him a chance once more. I also ask if he will revile the name of Christ. He refuses, or she refuses, for women are very numerous among these Christians. If the accused refuses to worship the emperor and the gods of Rome, and refuses to revile the name of Christ, I put them to death because they are committing treason, for they will not worship the gods who protect Rome. And Trajan writes back and says, you are doing exactly the right thing. Do not make use of anonymous informants. That is contrary to the humaneness of our era. But if they are intransigent like that, then they must be put to death. Treason is a capital crime. And we will find not only the Optimus Princeps, the best of Emperor Trajan, but also the most humane man ever to be emperor of Rome, Marcus Aurelius, persecuting, from our point of view, the Christians, from their point of view, protecting the moral and religious values of the Roman Empire. What is Christianity? It is a religion that, like every idea, is a product of its time. It rests upon monotheism, a belief in one all-encompassing God, but it also has a Savior who has come down to earth, God of God, sent down by his Father, who is the all-knowing, all-loving creator of the universe, who so loves mankind that he gives his only begotten Son, who suffers, who accepts the destiny laid out for him, who dies and is resurrected, and by believing in him, you never die. You gain eternal life. Well, these concepts of monotheism and the Savior God were fundamental to the spirituality of the 2nd century A.D. And in these two lectures, we want to focus upon two famous Romans who embody these ideas and played a significant role in their spread. Both of them would take the term philosopher. Both were searchers after the truth. Epictetus was a teacher. Apuleius was a successful attorney and the writer of one of the most ribald and yet profound novels in history. To look for Epictetus, we go out to the northwestern part of Greece. We go out to where we fought the great battle of Actium between Mark Antony and Cleopatra and Octavian, that decisive naval battle that would transform history. And out of the spoils of victory, Augustus had created a town called Nicopolis, the city of victory. And there we would find Epictetus teaching. He is a teacher worthy to rank with Socrates, Socrates who was the model for Epictetus. It is a barren place, Nicopolis. It is cold and wet in the winter. It is hot and humid, filled with mosquitoes in the summer. And on a regular basis, Epictetus receives from Rome a letter from the Emperor Hadrian, who was a great admirer of his, asking him to come back to Rome. He will be paid an enormous salary, be free to teach anything he wants. But Hadrian wishes for this greatest of teachers to come back to Rome, to be at the capital. And always in the politest of terms, Epictetus says no. For this is where God has placed me. Epictetus had been born a slave, probably around 50 A.D. He had been born in what we call Turkey today, in Phrygia, in Hierapolis, the sacred city, an area known for its devotion to the gods. He had been born a slave. Parents had been slaves. He had been treated so brutally by one of his earlier masters that he always walked with a limp. So he knew what it was to be a slave. He'd come to Rome and been brought into the household of one of the freedmen of Nero. Epaphroditos was his name, and Epaphroditos had been a slave who had been freed and risen to high estate and considerable wealth. And so Epictetus knew what it was intimately to know someone who had been a slave, had gained what men called freedom and wealth, and was a friend and associate of Caesar. And this master arranged for Epictetus to be freed, became a Roman citizen, and enabled him to study in Rome, to study with Musonius Rufus, one of the most famous teachers of his day, who taught the philosophy of the Stoa, the Stoics. We have met them when we talked about Publius Cornelius Scipio the Younger. We have met them with Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, the teachers who arose in the era after Alexander the Great. And Epictetus went on to become a teacher in his own right, to be well known in the universities of Rome, and then with other philosophers to be driven into exile by the Emperor Domitian, because they spoke out too freely. They spoke out against what they saw as a tyrant. And Domitian sent them into exile. Epictetus went off to Nicopolis, and there he stayed. Now, like Socrates and like Jesus, Epictetus never wrote a book. Do you ever ponder that? That the greatest teachers in history have not written books. So when they came up for tenure at our universities, Epictetus would be told, no. You've not written. We have no indication that you have any plans to write. In fact, you say you're not going to write. Why? Why does a philosopher, I don't mean someone who teaches in an academic philosophy department today, I mean a real philosopher, someone who searches after the truth. Why does this person never write a book? It is not a coincidence that Socrates and Jesus and Epictetus never write books. It's not as though they're saying, I just could sit down, if I could just sit down and I'd write this book, it's really important. No, because to write a book is to indicate that you have the truth, that the truth is complete there in you. But only God knows the truth, and your life is spent in trying to find it. And what you should do, instead of writing a book, is to live what you know to be the truth, insofar as God has made it known to you. A sheep, Epictetus says, does not bring his fodder, his food, to his master and say, look what I've got for you. A sheep eats it and then grows wool. And that very growing of the wool, carrying out his natural purpose, is what God has willed for him. And so Epictetus teaches. And he teaches undergraduates there at Nicopolis. And the universities of the 2nd century A.D. weren't all that different from our own universities. They were primarily places of getting credentials. Now, most Romans, and by Romans we now mean Greeks as well as those living in Italy, most of the citizens of this empire wanted an education for their sons. Sometimes their daughters were educated, but certainly for their sons. It was a way of getting ahead in the world. We already found that the father of Cicero saved and saved so his son could go to university. For that is how you get a good job in later life. You begin generally at home by learning your letters, and then you go on to study with what we would call, middle school and early high school, grammar, which was reading and interpreting literature. And then you learned rhetoric, what we might call the last 2 years of high school. And rhetoric was what gave you the ability to speak, to persuade. Very, very important, whatever path you took in life. Gave you a certain acquaintanceship with the law. But then your undergraduate studies, and particularly what we would call your junior and senior year, your parents hoped to send you to a good university where you would learn philosophy. And so these are 20, 21, and 22-year-olds that Epictetus is teaching. One of them, Arian, like many of the others, will go on to distinguished careers in the Roman public service. Arian will be a general, a high administrator, very well thought of by the Emperor Trajan, who will write a magnificent biography of Alexander the Great, our best biography of Alexander the Great. And will also write down as a student, because he is already so taken with his teacher Epictetus, everything that Epictetus says in his classes, and then publish them. Publish them so the world can know something of the brilliance of this teacher and of his message. And it is through Arian that we have preserved the discourses of Epictetus, what he said in the classroom, and his handbook, his Enchiridion, his handbook or distillation of his knowledge, prepared by Arian, for those who didn't have the time to go through all of the long 2-volume discourses. And we see Epictetus as a lecturer before these students. And God has given Epictetus the task of showing them how to think about leading a moral life. He does not want to fill their heads up with knowledge, with information. He is not concerned with their being able to pass a historical literacy test or with knowing where the capital of the province of Mauritania is. That is of no consequence. What is of consequence is that they lead moral lives. And he starts off by rooting this morality, this practical approach to life, in God. And a Stoic could give a hymn that a Christian would understand. A hymn like, Our Father which art in heaven. This comes from a Stoic hymn, as well as from Jesus. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Men and women call upon you by many names, but you are one, and your power and your love and your glory is everlasting. You are the architect of the universe, and everything that is in the universe is created by you. And all things happen for the good to those who believe in you and follow your purpose. And then, with this belief in God, a belief in absolute truth. The truth is immortal, A thanaton, aletheia, says Epictetus. The truth is immortal. There is not one truth in Rome and another truth in Sparta. Truth is always and everywhere the same. And you, if you truly follow the will of God, if you understand that there is no evil in the universe, God does not permit evil. It is only your judgment that makes something seem evil. If you will follow the will of God, accept what He gives you, you will find true happiness and true freedom. And the key to understanding happiness and freedom, the key to understanding the will of God, is to know that we have control only over three things: our mind, the thoughts we take with that mind, and the actions we take on the basis of those thoughts. We can control our mind, our thoughts, and our actions based on those thoughts. What you do not have control over is your body, is your job, is your property, is your reputation. Those are, in fact, in the words of Epictetus, only fantasies. They have meaning only if you give them meaning and reality. But they are nothing. Understand that. And the first thing in judging any event is, what is its nature? You have a jug, a favorite jug of yours. It falls on the ground and is broken. That is in the nature of a jug. It breaks. Do not grieve over it. Oh, that's easy enough to say. What about a child? Epictetus married only late in life, and he married to rescue a little child that had been put out to die, exposed to die, unwanted. And he took it in and married to have someone help him bring it up. But what about a child? For he loved this child dearly. Like Jesus, he said, "Let the little children come unto me." If your child dies, that's more difficult, isn't it? But a child is human. And it is in the nature of humans that they die. So you must not grieve. You do not have control over your job. To worry about your job is to make your boss, because everybody has a boss, don't you see? My former master had a boss called Nero. Now, my master was one of the most powerful men in the empire, but he trembled every day. Does Nero send for me? Where am I going to sit at the banquet? So everybody has a boss if you have a job. And you lose that job. Well, it is in the nature of jobs that they get lost. And that job is nothing to you. Now, it becomes something if you grieve about it, if you worry about it. But take it that God wanted you to lose that job. I know, but they conspired against me. My enemies at work conspired and got the job away from me because I was the only person that was capable. They are villains. No, they aren't. They are just the instrument of God. And who is it for you? Who are you to say to God, choose a different instrument? God used them to get your job. Now you're going to say, I know, but I will lose my Lexus. Now that I have lost my job, I can't keep up the payments. Well, the Lexus is an automobile. It is a fantasy. Well, I know, but my family's not a fantasy. What are they going to eat? It is better, says Epictetus, that you and your family starve than that you give up your freedom by becoming the slave of these fantasies. It is not easy for everyone to follow this path, says Epictetus. Many want to be philosophers, and he's looking out at this group of students. And all of you think you are free. Why, when I meet your fathers on Visitor's Day, the father comes in the toga of a senator, this purple stripe. And I say to him, are you free? And he says, what do you mean, am I free? My family goes back to the most distinguished families of Rome. I know, but are you free? Well, what do you mean? I'm a consul. Yes, but that doesn't mean you are free. You live in terror of losing your reputation. What would you be if you weren't a consul? What if people did not give you the due regard of a consul? You would feel crushed, would you not? So however much money you have, you are still a slave. And that money or that reputation is your master, and you have no control over it. Do you understand that? It can be taken away from you. But no one can take away your thoughts, your mind, and what you do based on those thoughts. Now, when you let others start setting your program for you, making you saying to you, darling, you have to make a lot of money so we can keep up our payments, then you have become a slave. But if you want to follow the road of philosophy, ask yourself, what is your nature? For if you do not have the nature to put aside the things that men call successful, do not start on the road of philosophy. Be content to make a lot of money. Be content to rise high in the establishment of Rome. For if you try to be a philosopher and try to get wealthy or powerful, you may end up doing neither. Don't be like a child who today says, I want to be a gladiator. Tomorrow says, I want to be a consul. The next day says, I want to be a soldier. If you want to be a philosopher, it is the same as if you wish to be an Olympic star. You have got to train. You have got to go on the special diet. You've got to drink only water. You have got to exercise constantly. And then when you get in the ring, you may be beaten up. For life will beat you up if you're a philosopher. People will say, there he goes, turned philosopher again. How much money do you make, philosopher? Well, we still say that. If you're so smart, why ain't you rich? So where is your money, philosopher? And you will say, but if I only spend a little bit more time on making money, I could still be a philosopher. I could still do the right thing, make the right choices, but make money too. And then I could give a bath to my city. No, if you're a philosopher, you don't want to give a bath to your city. And why should your city expect you to give it one? Does it expect for the blacksmith to give it shoes? Or for the shoemaker to give it wagon wheels? That is not your nature. Be content if the city has at least one virtuous man in it. Now, I do not ask you to stand away from danger. If God has put in your path a difficult and dangerous decision, to fight for your friend, to fight for your country against a tyrant, do it. But when it is over and you have been defeated, do not cry out and whine to God, why did you let this happen? God made it happen for the good. And if these results are too painful for you, then you can have the philosopher's true end. Just like a Cato. Kill yourself. That way is always open. So being a philosopher is not going to be easy. We worship the gods, and that is our duty. Piety towards God who has made the universe. Carry out the ordinary sacrifices that men do, but know in your heart that the supreme greatness and goodness of God does not need our sacrifices. We are His slaves, fulfilling His will and law, and in that we find true happiness. I say to you, and this is His commencement speech as you are about to depart, keep in mind the great hymn of the Stoics. Lead on, O God, and I will follow. Whatever you compel me to do, I will follow with a good heart. The ancient Athenian playwright Euripides already knew this. We hold that man as wise and skilled in things divine, who accepts the destiny of God and follows God. And remember what Socrates said in his last days. If it seems good to the gods, O Crito, let it happen. And then my parting words to you from our model Socrates. Anytus and Melitus, my accusers, can kill me. They can never harm me. You can only harm yourself by following the false illusions of the world, by letting men rather than God set your program. Understand you control only your mind, your thoughts and your actions. Think right, do right, and you will find true salvation.